Thank you. Thank you, Justin. Oh, while I have a second, just want to make a quick announcement that September 16th is not the fourth Tuesday of the month, so you'll have to come a little bit earlier than you normally would. And with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Awais Qureshi, and I will let him introduce our speakers today.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Awais Qureshi. I serve as the Marketing and Programs Chair here at the M&A Forum. Very special day today. And before I actually introduce our speakers, just by a show of hands, who here remembers the core values of their company? I'm going to put everyone here on the spot, just by a show of hands. Wow, very few. Okay. All right. Well, out of curiosity, what's one core value that is exemplified by a leader at your company? Who can answer that question? What's one core value that's exemplified by a leader at your company? Ray.
All right, I'm at Colliers, and number one core value is being enterprising. And a lot of what our leaders demonstrate is listening for understanding as we're going through the real estate process. And I see it for every project, being enterprising. That's it.
Being enterprising. All right, fantastic. I'm going to do one more in the audience, and then I'm going to move on. Who else? Please say your name and yes.
Isabel Wallace, and I'll say it's team spirit, right? Particularly the years that I followed COVID, I think it's exceptionally important to exemplify team spirit. A lot of organizations, enterprise-wide, are changing these days, and to be able to lean on one another, leverage each other, pick each other for resources, and just work collaboratively to tackle through different pieces and with each other's strengths. I think it's really exceptionally important.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And here's the reason why I bring that up. Because what happens at the top essentially permeates and sets the tone for everyone else that's serving in that company. That's essentially they're fulfilling the promises that you've made to your clients or your customers, right? And those are the things that you become known for by your customers and your marketplace. Well, last month, the speaker emphasized how important it is to not just be an acquirer of choice, but also an employer of choice. A few months before him, we had another speaker who he performs cultural due diligence to find the right target company. And in order to do all of that, right, because of those things, we wanted to just dig a little bit deeper. And today, I wanted to bring in Shafiq Jadallah and Jeremy Jenson, who essentially have been in the trenches of building up high-performing leadership and really building up those teams to outperform their competition, especially in times of chaos. So without further ado, if you can please help Shafiq Jadallah, Jeremy Jenson, please join me at the front. All right. Is y'all's mic on?
Mine is, I think. Check.
Check your mics.
Check 1, 2. Who knows? You're gonna cheat.
Yeah. Well, I have to bring my questions, right?
I'm not gonna go into battle unarmed.
Yeah. There you go. That's a good metaphor.
All right.
Jeremy.
Am I good?
All right. You got to look good for the camera. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. And why don't the two of you I'll give it to Shafiq and Jeremy. Give us a quick overview and a little background on the both of yourselves.
Sure. So thank you and welcome. Thanks for having me always and the M&A Forum. So Shafiq Jadallah. So spent my life and my career where as an operator and led a business to successful exit about 2.5 years ago with the principals, and then joined an investment group, a family office called 1588 Ventures 2.5 years ago, where I'm currently in the role of Chief Operating Officer for the portfolio companies that we have majority holdings in.
How about you,
Excellent.
Jeremy?
Yeah, Jeremy Jenson, founder and CEO of Encore Search Partners. We're a 40-person executive search firm here in Houston. Started the business way back in 2013, and now we're the largest privately held executive search firm here in Houston. I'm the founder. I've got a president and COO that kind of oversees finance, HR, and operations. And then I've got division presidents that run their practice areas, much like managing partners of law firms. But we run a great business that specializes in poaching high-performing talent from people's competition.
Fantastic. Well, let's kind of dive in deep in terms of what companies get wrong, and I'll point that to you. What is it that companies get wrong in their first stage of, let's say, when they're hiring a leadership?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that they get wrong?
Yeah, great question. I think the common misconception from a founder or CEO in the early stage is that they need somebody that would be qualified to be their business partner in order to get them to the next level. And so whenever I'm talking to entrepreneurs that are saying, hey, Jeremy, we need a COO or we need a CFO or a CTO. Let's say if they're at 5 million in revenue and they're envisioning this person that's going to help them get to 100 million. And what I really encourage them is that the guy that's going to get you from 5 to 20 million is very different than the guy that's going to get you from 20 to 50 and might very well be different than the one that's going to go from 50 to 200, right?
Yeah.
And so really becoming a little bit more focused on what the near-term goals are within the next 18 to 36 months, and then hyper-focusing on the skills and experience of an individual that's done it before, and not necessarily being super hyper-focused on your grand vision of your 10-year BHAG.
That's a good point. So Shafiq, your track record speaks volumes. And, when you walk into a new situation, what's the first thing that kind of stands out to you with an existing team where you feel like, you know what, there's some gaps here? So what stands out to you?
Well, it's been my experience when I first walk into situations like that, and to reference a great book, if you have not read it, read the first 90 days. But it's a great playbook on what to do when you do step into a new acquisition or any new kind of entity. And the first thing I do is just listen and learn. So I actually go through a methodical process where I quasi-interview everybody on the team, whether it's the leadership team or the managers below it, just to get to know them. And the two things that I'm looking for is aptitude and attitude. You got to figure out and ascertain where that person is on those two components, right? Aptitude is important, can they do the job? And then attitude is do they want to do that?
That's a good point. And, I opened up with this, and I certainly believe that culture is a big component. It plays a huge role in that. So, that's not something that you can measure on a balance sheet necessarily, unless, you really try to dig deep into that. Mm-hmm. So how much weight do the both of you put on culture versus pure competency? Why don't you answer that first, Jeremy?
Good.
Yeah, I mean, we've all seen the LinkedIn post, right? That culture eats talent for breakfast or some weird. Oh yeah. But what I'll say is culture is critically important. I think one of the big struggles for small to mid-sized companies is maybe they don't have clarity around what their culture is, right? Sometimes the core values are on the website or even on a decal on the wall. But if the leadership team is not, sleeping and breathing those core values each and every day in their personal, even professional lives, that's going to get lost in translation down through the team, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that if you do have clarity around your mission, vision, and values, that ultimately becomes your culture if you're consistently implementing it and holding people accountable. And if you have a strong brand, if you're doing a good job of showcasing it on social media, whether it's LinkedIn in order to attract clients, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or TikTok in order to attract potential hires, right? If you have consistency and authenticity, you're going to attract the people that culturally align.
Absolutely.
To where it's not necessarily trying to, put a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah. And a brand isn't necessarily just for customers, right? It's got to be for employees.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And look, to follow up on that, the Warren Buffett quote on, culture versus strategy, it's correct. But what's omitted there is competency still matters. But competency and then finding the right cultural fit. If you think about it, all of us here, we've all gone to work at companies and just ourselves realized, I went to work for a multinational, multi-billion-dollar organization and discovered that's not the culture that I wanted to be in. So competency matters, and it's the hard part is finding the competency that fits in the culture you're trying to build.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you got to understand that those two are not mutually exclusive, but rather they're codependent.
Yeah. And that's actually a great segue to Jeremy. This is something, so I'll put him on the spot. Jeremy is unafraid and more than willing to say what probably 90% or 99% of the other search firms in his market they're a bit shy to admit this. He leans into the fact that he poaches for his clients. He poaches talent for his clients from their competition, and he leans into that. So, Jeremy, with that said, what makes even a high-earning, high-performer poachable, right? And how does a company essentially say, you know what, we need to build a moat around our high performers and high earners, so it's not open season from Jeremy Jenson?
Oh, yeah, great question. I would say that the commonality around why performers leave organizations whenever they're consistently being recognized as an A player is really, leadership not following through with what they said that they were going to do, right? If leadership is saying, hey, we're going to implement this new technology in order to make your job more effective. Hey, we're going to hire a support team around you in order to help you build a business unit. Hey, I'm going to give you that 30% variable bonus this year. And oh, by the way, hey, we didn't hit profit margin, so it was only 10%, right? That if you're not actually doing what you said you were going to do, high performers are always going to be exposed to at least taking a phone call from a headhunter, right? Now, what sets apart a good headhunter from a staffing recruiter is a great headhunter is a skilled storyteller that can get an open candidate 100% interested in their client's opportunity. In order to do that, we have to understand what the sizzle is for the client, right? Not every single company can go out and offer somebody a 30% raise in order to lure them over, right? But, if the founder of the company, just did, his sixth Ironman and, fitness and nutrition are like core values of the organization, if that resonates with an A+ performer that also has the same mission, vision, and values, then guess what? That person's going to have an interest in working for that entrepreneur.
Absolutely. And it's got to align. I mean, I certainly believe that alignment is crucial, right?
And so it's important to identify, if you are a small to mid-sized employer, what is your value proposition? What is your unique selling point, right? And really, really lean into that in all of your marketing collateral and your recruiting collateral for talent acquisition.
Absolutely. Well, you're speaking my language there. And let's bring you into the picture, Shafiq. So the two of you have obviously worked with one another. What put Jeremy on the radar for you? And when was that exactly? What was that inflection point?
Well, so look, to Jeremy's credit, right? I mean, the promotion on, so I learned about Encore Search is like, from watching LinkedIn. I started following Jeremy, and when I became COO at Avantgarde, and I've kind of gone through that assessment, looking at aptitude versus attitude, and kind of figuring out where the people are and who do I have, and who I needed to go get. And then I asked myself, back to competency and culture, what's a recruiting firm in Houston that has that spirit, that will understand what I'm trying to sell? Because ultimately, if you're out there recruiting and you want to recruit A players, you are selling a story. So Jeremy's right. So I remember I texted him. He replied, which is amazing. And then I remember going to, it was your
That's the bar, just a reply on a text.
well, hey man,
Uh-huh.
you're a busy guy, dude.
Yeah.
So I remember going to your old office,
Uh-huh.
and so I went and spent an hour getting to know Jeremy, because I wanted to understand,
Yeah.
if he could understand our story. Back to your point about selling that story, and so he told me his story, which I found fascinating, and then I told him the story of Avantgarde, so that when his recruiters were out there and they were going to call and pitch, because we were small, privately held, we were trash broke, we were recycling, but I mean, but there's one thing to say, look, you're selling waste, right? There's another one to say you're saving the world. And so what's going to compel the A player is understanding that they may not get a pay raise of 30%, they may not get this big equity grants, but they're going to do something that has meaningful impact on the world and is doing something that hasn't been done. That's a compelling story, and that's how you kind of build that moat. So,
Right.
so that's why I went to Jeremy. What was that, like 2020, I think, right?
2019, yeah.
2019.
Yeah. So he came to us looking for a VP of technology,
Yeah.
and we didn't sell a trash recycling business. We sold a computer vision technology company.
Yeah.
That was disrupting the recycling industry and positioning themselves to be a
Yeah.
targeted acquisition of a Fortune 100 major.
So that was essentially what that was kind of that inflection point that got you to even start looking for a high performing leadership team, is particularly like we're headed towards some sort of an exit.
To an extent, right? I mean,
Yeah.
almost all private businesses are going to look for some form of exit in the
Yeah.
future. So it wasn't necessarily on a roadmap that we had, but I knew what we had to go do to go build the company, to go create great value, not just for the principals, but for the key employees there. So yeah, so you go through your diagnostic, look for aptitude and attitude, figure out what competencies I need, and then met with Jeremy to go find, okay, not only competency, but culturally, who will make that fit.
Got it. And yeah,
So
go ahead,
you
Jeremy.
use the word exit, right? I think in the idea of mergers and acquisitions, we think that an exit means selling your company or
Yeah.
bringing in private equity for growth capital. But I don't know if the audience knows this, but we recently placed the president of Americas for Tommy Sutherland, the speaker last
Oh, yeah.
month. And Tommy's exit was he wanted to spend more time in Scotland and in Thailand, right, with his wife and kids, right? And so an exit for him was putting a competent individual in a position where it could be a manageable base salary with a big upside tied to EBITDA growth that would give him the freedom and autonomy to spend more time on his family and his legacy.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
What their desired outcome is.
Yeah, correct. Exit is a desired outcome. Not
Absolutely.
necessarily a quitty event.
I love that. Exit is a desired outcome. Yeah. And
I'm going to trademark that.
yeah.
Jacqueline, get on it.
Well, let's put the lens on you, Shafiq. Particularly at Avantgarde, there are wartime leaders, and then there are peacetime leaders, and I'm certain that it took battle for you to essentially become that wartime and seeing battle in order for you to prove yourself as a wartime leader. So what did that battle look like for you, particularly at Avantgarde, where you essentially saw 40% growth and commercialized an entirely new platform and essentially grew that EBITDA to 40%?
Yeah, well, sometimes war generals are made on the field. So I took over. I got promoted to CEO of Avantgarde December of 2019, and then, as we all know, 3 months later the world shut down. So and I would be remiss if I didn't recognize that I worked for great entrepreneurs who who kind of saw this coming. One of the partners was actually in China, and we were fortunate enough that when Abbott shut everything down, we were actually already mobilizing one of our portfolio companies, and we had landed the first plane with masks. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, so I had the luxury of becoming a war general, but I also had oxygen because those masks, we weren't price gouging, but we were selling masks, and that gave me the working capital necessary to then calmly, well, somewhat kind of calm, send everybody home from the pandemic, do the aptitude attitude check to see if we had the right people in place, understand our strategic roadmap. So the whole year of 2020, I was able to manage that battlefield, if you will, with the people. And then when we were coming out of the pandemic in 2021, we were able to hit on all 6 cylinders. And yes, we ended up, growing our EBITDA by 40% because I had everybody, all the right people in all the right places. I had kind of screened for aptitude and attitude and gotten them out of the business, and then met up with Jeremy to hire for competency and culture.
Wow. Okay. When you meet a founder, Jeremy, that obviously wants a high-performing exec, but isn't ready to empower one, how do you handle that conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it happens all the time. I'll answer it with that. That people come to us and they say, hey, we need a COO, or we need a CFO, or a VP of engineering, or a technology leader. And, I think that especially, people my age, a little bit more old school, we think in terms of like these drop-down buckets on Zoom Info, right? That everybody needs to fit into a box, a department and a title. I need a chief financial officer or a director of HR.
They're checking boxes.
Yeah, they're checking boxes. And what I challenge them to put thought into is, what do you need this CFO to accomplish over the next 24 months, right? And then, through that discovery process, they may say, hey, we're facilitating a new ERP implementation and migrating away from JD Edwards to Microsoft SharePoint. And so I need somebody that's taken, right, 2 full cycle implementations all the way to fruition. Oh, and by the way, they need to have experience in a manufacturing environment. So now we turn it into a fillable role, going to a technology implementation consulting firm of somebody that has a finance background at the senior manager level. And we're getting a rock star A player that's taken his very first CFO job title in his career.
Yeah.
On a lateral compensation, right? And so that's what I need entrepreneurs or small business CEOs to see, is if you're not ready and willing to give full freedom and autonomy to a CFO to create the roadmap, right? Find the people to do it and implement it tactically, then what you really need is just somebody to do the tactical implementation. And so you need to reframe your way of thinking and stop thinking of titles on a spreadsheet and what experience and skills do they have.
Begin with the end in mind.
Well, and to follow up on that, sometimes it's not just the end in mind, but finding and building really great teams. I call it the Bud Fox effect for those old school people that have known, remember the movie Wall Street, right? Like that's that attitude component, because like in Jeremy's example, and I've actually told Jeremy, like, I don't want the person that's already a director or already a VP. I want the person that wants to be one. Because that's what you really want, especially for these smaller, you think about these small private companies, if you're in that, call it between $2 to $5 million EBITDA range, right? You have to be fungible in any role. Because one day you may be doing a CFO for implementation for ERP, and then the world shuts down. Now you got to figure out how to go talk to banks and get liquidity, because the ERP doesn't matter if you're not doing a transaction and you don't have cash in the bank. So I've always been an advocate of, back to Jeremy's point, look for people that are hungry, that are those Bud Foxes that, they may be on paper this role, but when you talk to them and you meet them, you get that, this person can also do these 15 other things that are going to get thrown their way, because that's how life comes at us. We got a plan, and then God laughs at you, and then the next thing you know, you're working in a different direction. So you want the people that have the competency to be able to fulfill the job, and then that aptitude and that cultural fit to be able to move around as your business will dictate.
Yeah,
So it's
Jeremy.
funny, as Shafiq's telling this story, the recruiter in me is triggered. um, because what he's really telling you guys is he wants the 28-year-old version of himself, right? Whenever he was building the little tomato product line at Nature Suite, right?
You remember that, yeah?
Right? Yeah. And I think that that's another thought that executives have in general, not just entrepreneurs, is they look for the younger version of themselves that they can mentor and develop.
Yeah.
And one of the big problems is you think of the numbers that you were getting paid
Oh, yeah.
18 years ago whenever you were doing that job, and you don't realize that 28-year-old kid makes 140 now.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? He doesn't make
Yeah.
65K.
Yeah, so some
right?
realistic
Oh,
expectations
and by the
now.
way, you're saying, he's got to have an industrial engineering degree from Texas A&M, you know? And it's like, bro, you have a chemistry degree from
Inflation is real.
Inflation is real, exactly.
And so it's
Exactly.
important to align, right? Like
Yeah.
all your wants and needs, right?
Yeah.
But again, I think what I'm saying is maybe it's a little bit less tied to the resume and more tied to the person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and look, part of why we're here, and of course, deal making. I talk a lot about being selective in who you bring on, and especially the types of clients that I bring on, right? And why that's important in this sort of a situation is because alignment is a big deal, right? So in that sort of a scenario, Shafiq, have you walked away from deals where you didn't necessarily see that there was alignment with respect to the leadership team?
Yeah, I've actually left the company after 2 months, realizing that there was a, they had this vision of what they wanted on paper, and we went through the interview process, and then stepping in, I realized that the founder wasn't, his why wasn't strong enough to make those changes.
Ooh.
So, and by the way, when you recognize that, then you just have the conversation. And so, yeah, I've left.
Yeah.
I've left companies. I've looked at companies we're going to acquire and invest in, and the same thing. You kind of meet those guys or those founders and realize that they're not going to let it go. So you got to take a step back and say that's not worth my effort.
Yeah. So they just lack that conviction in their purpose.
They
and their
haven't.
drive.
They haven't found it yet, right?
They haven't found it.
Yeah, I mean, look. There's another. I read a lot of books. So there's a great book called ADKAR about change, and the fundamental premise is people. Fundamentally, we're all the same biologically. We all are. Like, we change for one of two reasons: either fear or need. And identifying
Oh, yeah.
one of those two is really important. Whether you are trying to implement change, or if you're a founder, you're an entrepreneur, and you're looking to sell your business. You got to ask yourself that question, what's going to drive my change? So that's another key component about that.
No, absolutely, and you bring up a great point in terms of the why we make decisions the way that we do. It's a survival mechanism more than anything else.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Jeremy, you want to add anything to that?
So I may have forgotten the question, to be quite honest, but
I don't think there was one.
But what I'll say is,
Have you walked away from any clients where you felt like there was a lack of alignment, particularly with regards to their
of course,
leadership
if
team?
I think I'm not going to pay my invoice, I mean,
Particularly their
the
leadership.
fact of the matter is, I think of myself as an individual investor in 10 different venture capital and private equity deals, right? I think three things need to be present in order for me to have confidence in putting my capital into an organization. And all three are trust, rapport, and credibility, right? Just because you're the most credible person doesn't mean you're going to be the right partner to invest in, right? There needs to be an element of trust, right? And then obviously, I think a lot of professional services providers really skip the rapport component, right? And so I think that all three need to be present in order for us to have confidence in working together.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That's a good segue to talking about when the deal is done, and particularly when it comes to integration. So what have you seen, Shafiq, where there's been poor integration or integration has just gone wrong?
So I've gone through the experience of selling to a strategic, and here's where, in this front, like both sides kind of overlooked a big component. And for, we're here to talk about like M&A transactions. So if you think about, if you're a seller, and when I look at companies to acquire, one of the questions that I ask the seller is like, what do you look for in a buyer? And it's not about money. I asked them, like, if you think about it, for a lot of these sellers, this is their major liquidity event. It's their baby. They spent 20, 30 years on it. And so it's like, back to Jeremy's point about that rapport, it's like, who do you want to hand this off to?
Yeah.
And it's a fundamental question that needs to be asked. And I always ask that of all the companies that I look at for acquisition. So I've gone through the experience of like, that was never something that got brought up. So we went through the pains of having a structure where you had a very entrepreneurial driven company that was used to doing things that had never been done before, right? So we were the first to create and deploy artificial intelligence for recycling. We were the first to create post-consumer resin for flexible films. And so we were always breaking barriers. And then we got bought by a company that, because of Wall Street, the last thing they could do was ever miss a number. Well, those two things kind of don't work hand in hand if you think about it. So we had a lot of pains during that transaction and post-transaction, because that big question about cultural fit and the rapport wasn't really focused on, and so it showed up post-transaction. So if you're going through any due diligence or you're going through that process, ask those questions and find out whether or not post-transaction, it's the airport test. Are you going to get along? Do both cultures of that company fit? If you're going to go acquire a scrappy startup and you're an old school, blue collar firm, you may not be a good fit, because you're buying them for not worrying about failure. So be mindful of that.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. Jeremy, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, so this integration was actually very profitable for my company because obviously there was some turnover on the leadership team.
Yeah.
But, what I can say is that a big problem that that acquiring entities, right, have whenever they're acquiring the small business,
Yeah.
is they're concealing too much information, right? I think that uncertainty creates a lot of movement, especially from like staff level and manager level individuals that aren't privy to the closed door conversations. And that leaves those candidates heavily exposed to headhunters like myself to poach them out whenever there's just grumblings of a private equity acquisition, right? And I think that whenever operating partners can come in and be open, honest, and transparent with their people, right? I think that breeds trust and rapport, right, with the team. To where even if they're being transparent and saying, hey guys, there's some duplicity in accounting, finance, HR, and IT. We're doing a talent evaluation. We're probably going to have to do a 50% reduction in force because of this acquisition. If anybody would like to leave the company, please raise your hand, right?
Yeah.
I think that can eliminate potentially losing somebody that you really were banking on staying, right? And so I would say honesty, transparency, authenticity are critically important
Absolutely.
post-acquisition.
Yeah.
Sorry, to follow up on that, because Jeremy's right. There's a, think about, and I always like to relate everything to us because we're humans. We all tell ourselves stories, and we make up these stories with whatever information we're going to have in the moment. And you may have 20% of the narrative, and you're going to fill the other 80% with your own narrative. I mean, if you think about, for those of you that are married, like, as married guys, we do this all the time, like, and I get it wrong all the time. But we do this. We create stories with impartial information. So Jeremy's right, and we did learn that, right? You got to fill in the rest of the gaps so that everybody's story is the same.
Mm-hmm.
And because not just do you risk people jumping ship or the mumblings, but all that productivity gets lost. Because if you think about the average life of a deal, call it 8 maybe to 14 months, right? Everyone's going to create their own stories, and then once you're writing that story in your head, you start to pause, and then you're like, well, what am I going to do? And then this and that, and then that becomes your reality for the next, call it, year, and that company's productivity and everything that you're acquiring or you're selling starts to go in the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man. Okay. Jeremy, you spoke a lot about trust, rapport, credibility. So, to what extent does a company's reputation play a role in attracting top performers?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that it's critically important to, retaining the people that you already have, that you need to be consistent about living the values that you preach,
Yeah.
right? Or else you're exposed to losing someone.
Exactly.
But from a recruiting standpoint, we have clients come to us all the time that want to steal people from their more notable, more successful competitors in the industry, and it's like, dude, like the VP of engineering doesn't want to leave Ferrari and go engineer Kias. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so I think that it's important to recognize, what is your unique selling point, and have a realistic pulse on who the best player that you can acquire could be, right? And so I think that in order to answer your question, reputation, you got to have authenticity and consistency,
Yeah.
right? You can't say that you live a God-centered, faith-based mission, and then we go to the CFO's Facebook, and they're not living that life themselves, right? And so,
Coldplay concert.
They're at a Coldplay concert. Is that what you're alluding to?
Come on, it had to be said.
I promise that wasn't intentional.
Someone in the audience said it.
But with that being said, right, I think that's where brand, is really
Yeah.
aligned with talent acquisition.
Certainly. No, absolutely. How about you, Shafiq?
What was the question?
That was a layup.
Reputation. Yeah. So no, I mean
reputation.
reputation. How has reputation played a role for you?
I've always been of the mantra like live the values that you want to exude, and
Yeah.
so to Jeremy's point, I mean maybe like at Nature Suite was a company that really focused on externally communicating some kind of reputation, right? Avantgarde, again, we were in the back of the dumpster diving and moving plastic to save the world, but we didn't have a reputation like outside of what we knew. Our reputation was really more internal. So, the principals were great guys, loved and cared for everybody, and so our reputation more was inside. So every time I knew that I had to go out to recruit, hence back to the conversation with Jeremy, and don't feel bad, but I've used other agencies all the time. I know.
That to me.
You don't hire in Mexico. So I've always told them the story because that was how we communicate our reputation.
So final thoughts. If someone approached you next Monday with a portfolio company that needs to double in size over the next 18 months, what's the first question that you'd ask them about their current team?
My first question, I would say, do you operate on EOS or scaling up? That would be my very first question. And if they said that they didn't even know what those were, right, that would lead to quite a few more follow-up questions, because I think that a lot of companies have these grand visions of what they want to accomplish, but they don't have a system in order to achieve it, right? And it'd be real easy for me to say, oh man, I want to be 11% body fat and be able to bench 325. But if I don't have a system and a plan that's going to help me get there,
Right.
then it's never going to become a reality.
Yeah. Shafiq, how about you?
So I actually take a different approach, especially when it comes to people. I purposefully ask to not be told anything. So the only thing I really asked for is like, give me an org chart so that I could see the names and kind of like where people are on paper. And then kind of going back to the previous comment, I go then and meet with everybody. And I ask them, I just get to know them as people. I get to know them about their role. And after I've kind of done that whole assessment, then I'll go back, right? Because here's the thing, right? Just like a negotiation, if you anchor with a predisposed opinion of that person, before you even meet them, you've already boxed them in. And you don't know what their superpower is. Because a lot of organizations get this wrong as well. They get people that have a great superpower, and they put them in a different role where they can't use that power. Mm-hmm. And if I get told, well, this person, but then I go meet them, I was like, well, they're because they're in the wrong role. Mm-hmm. So I like to go in really with a clean slate, and then I'll go back with my own assessment and then ask them the questions. Okay, so tell me about this person, tell me about that person, and then I can crisscross with what they tell me and they know with what I've learned.
Got it. And okay, so final question. If you were writing an investment thesis for your next investment, right, for your next deal, how would you articulate the team component in that particular deal?
We'll give that one to Shafiq.
Yeah.
So, if you exclude the great artists of the world, you know, like the Rembrandts, the Mozarts, the Monets, if you think about the things that get created in this world, whether it's the first airplane or taking a person to the moon or even writing our Constitution, it was all done by a team. It was a group of people who got together with a shared value and shared purpose to create something that was greater than themselves. So the thesis would be people make teams, and teams are truly what create things that could not have been created before. Like that one?
That's great.
Follow
That's
up.
It. No.
That's amazing.
Ditto.
Great.
Yeah.
You want to add something, Jeremy?
Absolutely not.
Okay. He took that. Yeah. He stole the show.
Yeah,
Well,
mic
with
drop.
that said, we've got the last 10 minutes, and I want to open that up for Q&As to the audience. So, who's got questions?
Is that the SBA man right there?
Yeah.
Where do you see humanoids, where do you see the humanoids and AI come into play with culture and people?
Who are you asking that to? Oh, you know, so that's a really good question. I remember 5 years, what is this, 20, so 6 years ago, when artificial intelligence was just nascent. I remember I took a 9-month course because I really wanted to learn and understand it. And I think, you know, it is an inevitability that's going to happen. But, you know, kind of going back to, if you think about what I just got done saying, computers do not relate. Computers do not create trust. Computers do not create bonds. So I think we're all going to learn how to work with artificial intelligence, you know, bots, you know, automate a lot of our lives, which to me, and that's why I sold this to the team when we launched our AI platform at Avantgarde, this wasn't a replacement, right? This is so that you can go use your superpower to do something much better, that because you've now gotten rid of this, you know, low value add item. But I will actually go on this verge say that as we move towards, or we catapult towards artificial intelligence and bots, more and more of us are going to want that human connection, and then we're going to have a lot more value placed on it, because we're going to get to the point where we can't distinguish between reality and non-reality from a screen, and you're going to want to have that physical and emotional connection, and to truly then build a team with AI involved in it. But the application of it and deployment will always be with people.
Yeah, it's an augmentation of your capabilities. It's not a replacement.
Correct. Well said.
Thanks.
No, it was great.
You want to answer that?
Next question.
Next question. Who's got another one?
Right here.
Yeah, Gina.
First of all, women also question themselves on a regular basis, so we're okay. But you hit a nail on the head in regards to the human component brings so much value to every organization. But you also talked about people's superpower and that we're trying to leverage AI to automate a lot of our practices, right? So I think where the scare tactic is so many people don't realize what their superpower is because they're so conditioned with what they've been doing on a daily basis. And so that fear comes in being replaced. So then what do you encourage leadership like you to help these individuals identify what their potential superpowers could be and help them optimize their career trajectory? It's probably a hard question to ask because I think we're all still trying to figure it out. But when you see a lot of reduction in force happening because automation is kicking in, then people are scared. So how can leadership kind of support that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'd mentioned 3 things need to be present in order to want to do business with someone: trust, rapport, and credibility, right? And I think that AI has gotten to the point where we trust it, right? We trust that it's going to have an accurate outcome, and there's no more credible resource than unlimited machine learning. But where it lacks is the rapport component, right? And I think that's everybody's superpower if they're intentional about it, right? How do I build trust and win friends? Am I showing up authentically? Am I actually intentional about developing friendships and relationships with people in the workplace? And I mean, we have people on the team that maybe aren't as talented or creative and innovative, and potentially not even as hardworking as some of their colleagues, but they're just generally likable, and they increase the morale of the team, right? And so that's the ultimate superpower if you're a data entry analyst or an HR administrator, that you can clearly see a path to your job being replaced with AI.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Be the most likable person on the squad. Don't be afraid to wear the mascot uniform.
Yeah. So we had that's a great point. There's a guy that, look, we had a guy that worked for us, and he was just the guy you love to be around, and that was his superpower. He was always trying to be somebody else. He was trying to be this great salesperson, and the organization, again, erroneously put him in this role to be a leader and to go manage this great sales team. He wasn't that guy. He was the guy that you wanted to just sit down and unload your life on, because he was a great listener, and you felt like instant trust with this person. So yeah, so I got him out of like certain roles, without like, no more computers for you. Don't worry about an Excel spreadsheet. Don't do these things, and just focus on being our relationship bond, because every customer you interact with walks away feeling better about themselves personally. Forget about the business, but they just walked away just from having to have a conversation with the guy. So it's a challenge, but you have to be cognizant of it for sure, right? And if you don't know what your superpower is, or the better question would be maybe, and this is hard, but you can take a step. I'm a big believer in trying to get away from the world for 48 hours. So I do this every year, where I go away, no phones, no kids, no wife. I play my Depeche, enjoy the silence song, but it's a great time to just reflect and then reevaluate. What am I really, not only really what am I good at, but what do I think I really want to be good at? So I encourage people to do that, because that always helps you reset and figure out your superpower.
Yeah. And when everyone here, that fear of artificial intelligence replacing humans, right? That piece, really think about, like you said, making others feel significant, making others feel better about themselves. That's not going to be replaced by artificial intelligence, right? And that genuineness and authenticity is going to be the competitive advantage that everyone's going to end up having when it comes to competing with artificial intelligence. So keep that in mind.
Well, and not sorry, but not to belabor the point. So you said, so I personally don't trust the results. I've studied it. I've done the algorithms. I created my own machine learning languages. But here's what a computer doesn't give you: context.
Yeah.
Like everything we read, everything we say, even in email. If you think about how we communicate really rapidly with asynchronous communication, which is email, and how you react most of the time, right? And you want to then you got to take a pause, because what you're missing is the context. And almost all of our communication and interaction, or where we get feedback from ChatGPT, starts with, what's the context with which I'm reading this? What mood am I in when I read this? And then how am I going to take that information and use it? So computers can be wrong, and the models aren't 100%, but the value of people is in reading and interpreting, and then using that information.
Thank you, Shafiq. And with that said, thank you both for being here. Please give them a hand of applause, please.
Good job. Awesome. Thanks. Thank you, brother.
All right, closing